Genesis chapter 16 offers a powerful narrative that speaks to human nature, faith, and the consequences of decisions made in moments of impatience. It is a story that transcends time, offering insights that resonate with our lives today. In this chapter, we encounter the story of Sarai, Abram, and Hagar, a tale marked by the struggles of waiting, the complexity of human emotions, and the profound impact of decisions made without trusting in God's timing. Through this chapter, we see a clash of divine promises, human choices, and the challenges of waiting on God. The lessons from this chapter are still relevant in our lives today, and they carry an urgency that calls us to evaluate our own faith and trust in God's plan. At the heart of Genesis 16, Sarai, who has been promised by God to bear a son, finds herself in a position of deep despair. She is barren, and the promises God made to her and her husband, Abram, seem distant and impossible. The weight of this unanswered prayer must have been overwhelming for Sarai, and in her desperation, she takes matters into her own hands. Rather than waiting on God, she decides to offer her servant, Hagar, to Abram so that they can have a child through her. This decision stems from a place of frustration and a lack of trust in God's timing. Sarai's choice demonstrates a key human struggle, the temptation to act when God's promises seem delayed. When Sarai proposes this solution, Abram agrees, and Hagar becomes pregnant with Abram's child. This is a pivotal moment in the narrative, as it marks the beginning of the consequences of acting outside of God's will. At first glance, it may seem like a practical solution, but the emotional, relational, and spiritual consequences are profound and long-lasting. The momentary relief that Sarai and Abram may have felt quickly turns to bitterness, jealousy, and strife. Hagar, who once served Sarai, begins to look at her with contempt now that she is carrying Abram's child. Sarai's heart is torn apart, and her decision leads to emotional pain and division that could have been avoided if they had simply waited on God. In this chapter, we also see the human tendency to take control when we feel that God is not answering our prayers. We, too, face moments in our lives when we feel as though God's promises are delayed. We might experience a sense of urgency, and in our impatience, we make decisions without consulting God. We may rush into relationships, careers, or actions that seem to solve our problems but ultimately lead to more pain and confusion. The consequences of Sarai's decision are not immediate, but they unfold over time, showing how a moment of impatience can alter the course of a life. There is also a deeper lesson about the nature of God's promises. God had already told Abram that he would be the father of many nations. But at the time of this chapter, it had been years since the promise was made, and still, Sarai had not conceived. God's promises, however, are not subject to human timelines. His timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. Sarai's impatience to fulfill God's promise on her own terms stands as a cautionary tale for all of us. How often do we try to force God's will into our own plans because we cannot wait for His timing? The emotional toll that Sarai and Abram face in this chapter is not to be underestimated. Sarai's bitterness grows, and she blames Abram for the situation, feeling that she has been wronged. Abram, who initially seems to go along with Sarai's plan, is now caught in a complex situation. The feelings of guilt, shame, and frustration begin to swirl around the family, creating an atmosphere of distrust and sorrow. Hagar, too, is caught in a difficult position. She was a servant, and now she is pregnant with the child of her mistress's husband. The emotional strain on all of them is immense, and it serves as a reminder of the destructive nature of acting outside of God's will. However, this chapter does not end in despair. God's intervention in the life of Hagar is a powerful moment in the story. Hagar, the woman who might have been seen as insignificant or disposable, is encountered by the angel of the Lord in the wilderness. She is instructed to return to Sarai, and the angel promises her that her son, Ishmael, will also be the father of a great nation. This encounter reveals God's compassion and care for those who are often overlooked by society. Even though Hagar was caught in the middle of a difficult situation that was not her choosing, God sees her, and He promises her a future. This moment in the wilderness is a turning point, not only for Hagar but also for us. It shows that no matter how far we may stray from God's plan or how much pain we cause through our decisions, God is still present. He sees us in our brokenness and offers grace. He does not abandon us, even when we make mistakes. God's promises extend beyond our failures, and He is always ready to restore what has been lost. The urgency in this story is that God's promises are real, but they are fulfilled in His time, not ours. The key lesson here is to wait for God's perfect timing and to trust that He is working in the background even when we cannot see it. The emotional journey in Genesis 16 is one that we can all relate to. We have all faced times of impatience, times when we have struggled to trust God. We have all experienced the emotional roller coaster of feeling abandoned or waiting for something that seems like it will never come to pass. But the story of Sarai, Abram, and Hagar reminds us that God's timing is always perfect. He sees our pain, our frustration, and our struggles, and He is faithful to fulfill His promises. However, we must learn to trust in His plan and not rush ahead of Him. When we take matters into our own hands, we often find ourselves in a tangled mess of emotions and consequences that could have been avoided. This chapter also underscores the importance of relationships. Sarai and Abram's marriage was strained because of Sarai's decision to act on her own. The relationship between Sarai and Hagar was forever changed, and the emotional fallout was immense. Our decisions do not only affect us, they affect everyone around us. Our impatience, our desire to control situations, and our lack of faith can damage relationships and create unnecessary conflict. The urgency of this chapter lies in the reminder that our choices matter, and they can have far-reaching consequences. The story also invites us to reflect on how we treat others. Hagar, a woman who was once Sarai's servant, finds herself in a difficult situation, and Sarai, in her bitterness, mistreats her. How often do we act out of our own pain and lash out at others, especially those who are vulnerable or marginalized? God's message to Hagar in the wilderness is a powerful reminder of the value He places on every life. No one is insignificant in His eyes, and He is always there to care for us when we are in distress. The urgency in this message is that we are all loved by God, and He is present to help us in every circumstance. As we reflect on the lessons of Genesis 16, we are reminded that the journey of faith is not always easy. There will be times when we feel impatient, when we struggle to trust in God's promises. But we must remember that God's timing is perfect, and His plan for our lives is greater than anything we could imagine. The story of Sarai, Abram, and Hagar teaches us to wait on God, to trust in His promises, and to seek His guidance in every decision we make. The emotional triggers of fear, excitement, and urgency are all present in this chapter, urging us to act wisely, to trust in God, and to remember that He sees us and cares for us. As we face challenges in our own lives, we must hold fast to the promise that God is with us. He is working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see it, and He will fulfill His promises in His time. We must not give in to the temptation to rush ahead, but instead, wait with hope and trust in His plan. Let this story be a reminder that even in our moments of impatience, God is still sovereign, and He will guide us to the fulfillment of His promises. If you find inspiration and wisdom in the messages shared here, I invite you to subscribe to the Shining Truths channel. As we explore more profound insights from Scripture, we continue to learn together how to navigate life with faith, trust, and hope.